The idea was to make a movie that was coming out of my experience on one hand, and on the other hand, to try to imply all that I was learning in the school in Prague, which means the language, the cinema language that I was taught by my professor and by many people that I was in contact with something that was strictly coming from the range of wide different experiences that I was exposed to in my early life. The fact that I was growing with the cinema of, not growing, developing my taste and my skills with the films of Milos Forman, Black Peter, the kind of cinema that was speaking about the first processes, spiritual and other processes that are starting at a certain age. In fact, also that I met Sidran, who was a very prominent and very good poet. The man with many talents, especially with a very good ear, and he was promising that he could make a dialogues, which never happened in Sarajevo, dialogue that could be the dialogues people could identify with. It's a language of the street of Sarajevo. So, many elements together, as usual, but none of them was promising a good movie. Because if you want to make a good movie, if you have a good, quite big experience, if you have a good knowledge, all this is not enough. But without this, you cannot even pretend to make the movie. In the early 80s, late 70s, I finished the school. I was making some student exercises which were not good. Some of them finally, the one that I made in the third year was good in a sense, not a movie of a genius, but the student movie that was discovering a space and the time. And might be I met many film directors who are very well educated, who know how to make cinema, but they never made a movie. Very humorous, very emotional, but they never learned how to send a signal in between everybody to get registered on this. I was aware of this, and then I think thanks to the fact that in the third year of my school in Prague, I discovered how the space functions with cinema, how the space is extension of your feeling. If you recognize this in the school, and if you have good elements like I did, including good screenplay write, good experience, understanding of the people, then you are exposed to the possibility to make a movie that people could like. And that's what happened basically with Do You Remember Dolly Bell? The movie that was having in the center family as a mythical place, the myth that everybody in the entire world understands, everybody knows what the family is, and then the young boy who is discovering the world. It's not a classical or typical teenage story, but it's also what I said before, it's the first steps into the world of fighting authorities, discovering a love, being exposed to the aggressive authorities around you, being exposed to the death of father, all the strong points of a life of a guy who discovers the life, in which then you are, as a film director, you have a lot of material to make a strong impact to the world of cinema. This is what I was always saying to my students. The beginning of your cinema has to correspond to your deep, either very abstract, but extremely close to you and emotionally affecting your subject, or something which brings you to the social environment that you recognize that you could do many things with. Otherwise, you are left alone in the middle of the ocean of cinema, which is very dangerous, because no matter how much you are skillful, how much you are charming, the subject or many elements around you could distract you and to divert you from possibility of making successful movie. So the environment of Dolly Bell is the one that was very easy for me to recognize and very. It's a world of outsiders, world of people coming from the outskirts, who are much, I would say, socially and the psychology profiles that you recognize, they are much more rich and colorful than when you have to make a strict kind of linear, dramatic, Shakespearean, whatever story that you always you want to secure yourself by making your first movie. So my environment from my youth, from my childhood, was basically my. If I was a painter, it was a wide range of different colors that I was. So if this film corresponds, if this film communicates, it communicates because it's my. It's every element of this movie, including these outsiders, including family members, including brothers. Everything was it's very close to me, and it was much easier to step into the world of cinema like this, because it often happens that young people make a first movie, the best students in the school, they are all, and then in the entire movie there is something missing. I think for the beginner, for the first movie, you have to dive into the world that you feel, that you know what it is, which was the case of Dolly Bell. All the outskirt criminals, small-time criminals, who are still bringing some funny life, not killing people, not doing the real crime, but kind of trying to survive. All the models of cinema coming to your life, like first time seeing a breast of Dolly Bell, which is part of a movie called Europa di Notte. So the social model of the breast was always brought to us by cinema. The first toothpaste, first Western goods that were brought to our country. We were relying to this. Not absolutely accepting it, but somehow it was starting to play important role in our life. So then, when you have a movie Europa di Notte, you recognize the body of the woman who was undressed for the first time for you in cinema. Then, when in this movie the small-time macro pimp brings the woman from the village, the main hero falls in love with her. She is measured by the social dimension of the appearance of the stripper in the movie. So this is even the way she was named. So like this, these parallel worlds of cinema, parallel world of music, parallel world of all the Western media, in fact, was a very important layer of the whole story, which is what's called. So why I'm mentioning this? Because when you are in the outskirts of Sarajevo, you are very often facing not just bright and beautiful world of colorful, funny, outraging, darling, whatever people, but also the impact of the music of 60s, Adriano Celentano, and the cinema, as I mentioned. So this world was not alone, it was not linear. It was just confronted with many aspects of life. This was also very much recognizing. This was helping the idea of creating this movie. We are referring to a certain period of life in Sarajevo. We are watching it from different angle. Sidran was a very sensitive poet, the man who was very funny, at the same time with a very strong language, but his view to a life was missing certain Czech cinema ironic distance from what was going on. So he was taking it too melodramatic, too serious. I was coming back from the school that was teaching you not to take things so seriously, to go to the patterns of Chekhov, Gogol, all this Slav kind of black humor, ironic distance from life. So combining these two elements, which was not very easy, because for Sidran to recognize the quality of this confronting human, heavy, funny situations, which I recognized at the early stage of my life, for him was not easy to understand. He was not deeply into cinema. But the 30 pages of script that he did, I have extended to 70, 80, which was bringing the architecture of cinema, because poets, they don't recognize that cinema is like building a house. They know the melody of, and the melody of the exchange of different dialogues make this kind of beauty, which is true, but cinema needs much more than that. What people do in between the lines, what people do before, what they do after. But more or less, we were referring to the same emotional reaction to the life, as I said before. Upcoming Western culture, subculture penetrating Balkans, and on the other hand, very deeply rooted elements of real life that we were both passing one way or another through the life of Sarajevo in the 60s. Because in the 60s, I went to the school, and he was already he was becoming a student. Very much kind of unique communist, how they call it, special type of communism that was soft communism in between the two blocks. But anyway, in this movie it was projected through the character of father, who was even having lines in the movie in which he was saying, I believe that communism will come to the year 2000, which is a beautiful utopia he had. In this period you had very anti-communist movies made in Serbia, in whole Yugoslavia. The problem with them was that they were very angry. They were very much kind of politically designed to be against communism. However, you are against one thing or another, but the problem with the structuring your movie is not to be against something. It's to be injecting the life and understanding that cinema is just having to do a very little with the life. It has to be much bigger than life. In this matter, I think Dolly Bell is a quite unique movie. The idea of doing a movie that was speaking about the social, political life of Sarajevo or ex-Yugoslavia, Yugoslavia at that time, was corresponding to my own experience, in which my father didn't like Tito very much, but not for the reasons of being very much anti-communist, but for the reason that he was arresting many of his friends for loving Russia, or being even fakely put into the position to be in love with Russia when Tito split with Stalin. Because we know that Tito was one of the best collaborators of Stalin at that time. So what I learned, what I was taught in school, was one thing, that Tito was the biggest, the most important, and on the other hand, in the family, in my home, he was not very loved. Since I recognized by my instincts that critical movies about communism, criticizing this and that, it didn't have to do nothing with the beauty of cinema, which by definition was my closeness to cinema, to discover miracles of life and beauty of the life corresponding to dirt of life, to the things that are not very beautiful by definition, but also to develop something that was bigger than life. In this, I was doing architecture of my cinema, taking into the consideration political level of this, Tito and others. But as I said in the beginning, it was not like a black wave of Yugoslav cinema, which was almost programmed to be anti-communist. My position being against them was to do more things through the laugh, through the irony, but less less to the declarations, less through the statements, and less to the being judgmental about who is right, who is not. This is a position that I kept so far up till today, being as less ideological as possible. And I think Dolly Bell was the one, especially the way I designed the character of father, who what I said before was the believer that communism will come up to year 2000. But his world was very vivid, very colorful, and very crazy. Like this, we could love this father, even he was a communist. So he was not stereotype, he was not propaganda tool. He was a man coming from the life, from my range of what I've seen in my life. So when I was portraying a father, taking certainly some elements of the experience that I had with my father, and like this, I was very, very, I would say, delighted seeing this movie after years and seeing that I was not so much affected by this propaganda trick being anti-communist, because all those who were anti-communist in this period, after the fall of communism, they vanished. It's like if they were used to be anti-communist. They're angry people, just, waving with this propaganda, anti-propaganda. And I think cinema and life are much bigger than that. It's a different type of Slav nations. One, very proud, very explosive, very impulsive, and beautiful. I mean, I'm speaking about our nation. And the other one, there was much more squeezing into the European humanist tradition. We had a strong literature, we had beautiful novels, we had the Nobel Prizes, we had a great culture, but in cinema we were not looking for the small man taken from Chekhov, from the small man when he drinks a beer, when he has his small little problems. This is what I learned in Czech, that this tradition comes from the Czech literature, from Bohumil Hrabal on one hand, but even Hašek, speaking about the war against the war, speaking about many other things. But here, no. Here it's always hero, big game, big thing, big guys. In Czech, in Slovak tradition, you have much more something that corresponds to my vision of life that I learned in literature of Chekhov, of, as I said before, Gogol and things like this.
And Švejk, of course.
Švejk, who is a monument of this idea. They say, člověk je chtěl být gigantem a je hovno. The man wanted to be gigantically big, but he's a piece of shit. It's to recognize this stage of humanity, I think it's very important. Many people that I was going to school together and trying to make a cinema afterwards, from this area, they never recognized this. They never recognized that these heroic, big, incredible, strong characters, guys who are changing the world and all of this, are belonging to the past, of a tradition of Barocco drama and things like this. Modern cinema from 70s to 80s, I think even today, at least the cinema I believe, is relying on anti-heroes, people who live paradoxical life, who are affected by paradoxes, by irony, by certain strange things that happen in their life, if they are not part of propaganda or action, dynamic Hollywood movies, which are just based on the very strong dynamism that is keeping people designed by sound and by image, and they feel empty as they were felt before when they enter cinema. But this is also industry. In this cinema, a major point was, what is the first? The main hero, the character, or the what you call action, or what you call destruction. We could go even a step further and say destruction, or kind of science fiction, whatever. In this type of cinema that I believe in, and even I did